Okay, I believe I'm now recording, and I want to start a timer as well. Clock, start recent timer, 20 minutes. Okay, the timer started. There's a picture of me, and here's the slides of the talk I'm going to give. So, I'm using slides of a talk I recently gave, which was a talk to a small group of people who've been working together for maybe 20 years, mainly lawyers, ex-prison directors, social scientists, people interested in miscarriages of justice. And so these slides are not really suitable for, they're certainly not suitable for a single YouTube film of movie of 2 hours or more. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to give the talk as a small course, you could say, or a mini series, maybe 6 episodes, maybe 8, I don't know, maybe 20 minutes a time. And this is the first one, and I'll only get through the first 2 or 3 slides. So I'm going to be talking about the cases of Lucia Berk and Lucy Letby, and you see pictures of them here. The picture of Lucia Berk is a photograph taken by me in her home when she's been allowed out on bail because the Dutch equivalent of the CCRC has asked for her case to be reopened, and the Supreme Court has agreed that the case should be reopened, and so she can be allowed out of jail, but she mustn't do much and certainly not leave the country. And the trial will start in the autumn. A new trial will start in the autumn because the prosecution still intends to prosecute and has the same list of indictments as before. Nothing, they've withdrawn nothing. The defense has got a lot more material now, and so the trial is going to be rather different, presumably, and indeed it was. She was exonerated in spring 2010, so she's looking a bit more cheerful because she has hope now, and she's back home with her family in The Hague. Lucy Letby, on the other hand, this is her mugshot, and it's a sad thing to look at, I think. She's being persecuted and slowly ground down and destroyed by extremely powerful agencies and persons. And 2020, so this is at the third time she was arrested. The previous 2 times she'd been allowed out again on bail after days of interrogation in the police station in Chester by Cheshire Constabulary. And this time she's just been arrested for the 3rd time, and this time she's going to stay uncharged, and she's just has not been granted bail, and she's going to stay in pre-trial detention for 2 years, due somewhat to Corona. Now, this group of people is called Mykonos, and I'm not going to waste time explaining you why they call themselves Mykonos. Well, I am going to waste time. It's the name of a Greek restaurant where they first met and decided to found their association or society, which holds a few talks every year on similar matters. And I was their invited speaker this time, and I was told in advance that I shouldn't assume any knowledge of maths, and so I promised that there would be almost no maths, certainly no maths formulas. Well, not really. There's one formula which I give in words. It's Bayes' theorem. Posterior odds equals prior odds times likelihood ratio. So I just have to tell you what likelihood ratio is. And likelihood ratio is basically the relative weight of a piece of evidence for the prosecution case versus for the defense case. And prior odds is how you see things at the beginning before knowing very much. Maybe just knowing that an arrest has been made or that a police investigation is started into a person. You don't know even what sort of a person yet. And the posterior odds is what you should tend to believe, having heard certain piece of evidence. And the thing is, mathematical thing is that you can apply this rule repeatedly to basically everything we now know, split it up into pieces of evidence, and that this doesn't have to correspond to chronological order in which information comes to you, though it could do. But and I think in my example, which I give in the talk, I do it basically in the order in which an independent observer, like myself, gets information, who's just observing the media, observing the reports of the trials, and so on, and so on. So the secretary of Mykonos said that told the members that I was, among other things, going to take them to the mathematical foundations of truth finding. Well, I'm not sure if any truth finders out there in the real world, whether juries or judges, do it this way. I believe they should do it this way in some extent, because the result of a court case should not differ from what a rational person should think, having heard the same material. There are technical side remarks to be made about that, but I won't do that now. Okay, let's march on, and I will only get to the first couple of slides, and in particular this slide, the second slide, I won't get to. I won't say anything much about it now. If you can read fast, go ahead and read it. And this is from the Lucia Deber case. And people asked me at this point, am I suggesting that there was some kind of conspiracy between a consultant pediatrician and the clinical director of a children's hospital and a top newspaper editor and a top politician and the public prosecutor? Am I suggesting a conspiracy? No, I'm just saying that various people involved in the case and in the police investigation and in the trial as experts or as witnesses and as communicators to the public during the trial, they happen to be members of the creme de la creme of the society in The Hague, where not only did the trial take place, but where the appalling crimes had allegedly taken place. And these people knew each other, and they were friends of one another, and they helped one another in difficulties, and they commiserated with one another when any of them was having a difficult time. And obviously the clinical director of the hospital where Lucia allegedly murdered about 10 children, or whatever many, murdered or murderously attacked. She was really, affected by the terrible things which seemed to have happened, which she believed had happened, and which she helped the prosecution, first the police to investigate, and then helped the prosecution to make it a legal fact. So, of course she was affected personally by what was going on to her patients in her hospital, had been, and by the whole thing. Right, and her friends stood by her, as they rightfully should have done. Maybe in a later part of the talk I'll come back to this and tell you also how I got to get these interesting documents, which is a nice story. But let's move on. Here's basically the abstract, which we can take as a little catalogue of topics which are going to come in almost all of them in subsequent installments, because this is going to be a mini course of or a mini series anyway. If I go through right to the end and fill in the details which need to be filled in by talking, which are not written up in the slides, because many things, the slides are my aide-memoire. They help remind me what it is I want to talk about. It's a talk, and I talk, and there's so much to say. So anyway, this is to remind myself and at the beginning what I want to talk about, and give you some idea. And I'm going to talk about similarities between those two cases, and they are absolutely stunning, and they are similarities both in the broad picture and in the general structure. And as you dig deeper and go into details of the case, there are repeated parallels in details. There are some differences, of course. I have an explanation for why they are so similar, despite the obvious differences. For instance, the fact that the Lucy Letby case took place in Great Britain how many years later than the Lucia Deber case in the Netherlands. So we are talking here about two very different jurisdictions, an adversarial and an inquisitorial. This 20 years has gone by. So many things have changed in society, in both societies, but in society in general. Two cultures of the two societies are different anyway, were different, still are different. And but the thing is that in both cases, as we now know, as I now know, there were no crimes. So they are both, but there is a suggestion of an appalling crime, of multiple appalling crimes, which shock society, which shock anybody who hears about them. There's moral outrage. There is immense urgency on the part of authorities to figure out what happened and find out who had done this, because there obviously was something. There was a spike, and a certain nurse was always there, and that nobody could understand the spike, but the nurse was always there. So there was an enormous urgency to find out if the nurse indeed was the cause of the deaths, and that would be horrific and called for rapid and drastic actions on the part of the authorities, and it called for immense media and public interest, obviously. So this makes the two cases very similar, because we have this prior situation, and actually there's not been a trial there at all. Sorry, there's not actually been murders there by the nurses in question. That means that the evidence which is there is not going to be very, very direct, because had it been very direct, those trials would not have been so long, and the heap of evidence would not have been so overwhelmingly large, and the arguments of the prosecutor or the judges would not have been so complex. So this kind of forces the two cases to be similar, and they are similar in this way to post-medieval, modern times in the sort of historical technical meaning of the word modern, or early modern. In early modern days, there is science, there are scientists, there has been a revolution in thinking. The world is becoming on the modern world. But such situations arise and call for things to be done, and the same kinds of things happen, and the same kinds of people are involved in the various roles. So, for instance, instead of a forensic criminologist, instead of a criminologist or a forensic psychologist, expounding on the mind of serial killers, which we have in both recent cases. One has a witchfinder general who did the same, and these were professional, trained, educated experts belonging to the elite, maybe of the church rather than science, but they were experts in witches, and they were experts in being able to tell that the person was a witch. Now, witches don't exist and didn't exist, so how they did that is interesting, but they had to use the kind of circumstantial evidence, the little things you can see if you're an expert, which people like to pretend they have the expertise. People who can judge from Lucy's or Lucia's demeanor in court that she really is guilty as hell, right, and deserves hell and is going to hell, and we have to help her get there as soon as possible. Now, that's one of the themes of my talk, and another theme is an aspect of the UK criminal prosecution service, which I think shows a defect in from the weft. I don't know, the weaving, the putting together, construction of criminal prosecution in the UK. I think the separation of the three powers has not been implemented well enough. We have judges who interpret the law, but the same judges write the law through making rulings in cases. So the law is not just what Parliament has agreed the law should be, which is their purpose and function and role in trias politica. Parliament creates the laws, judges interpret them. But no, in the UK, judges make the law and remake it continually. And of course, in actual fact, in the Netherlands, to some extent, Dutch judges too. We have a Supreme Court, and it may, and consists, of course, of lawyers, judges, legal experts, and judges, and they also tidy things up and interpret things from time to time. Of course, they should do that with reference to the Constitution, with reference to the founding laws concerning the rule of law, concerning this part of the rule of law, namely prosecution of criminals and what punishments to give to criminals. So I think I've now talked a little bit about the things I want to talk about. I have 2 minutes. I give myself 2 more minutes for this. I also want to talk about the role of the media, which of course in the Lucy Letby case has been enormous. I think nobody can deny that. And ongoing. And of course this is due partly to the difference in any case between British mainstream media and the Dutch mainstream media, but we've also had 20 years gone by, so society has evolved in both places. The media have evolved. Social media has become an extremely powerful source, an extremely powerful agent of changing, moving, manipulating public opinion. And public opinion influences legal opinion, I'm afraid, and expert opinion, I'm afraid. I mean, I'm also glad. Because at the end of the day, if Lucy Letby is going to have to get out of jail, then it's going to have to be lawyers who take care of that, and scientists, with the help of scientists, one could say. And it will help, everybody knows, it will help if the public is on the same side, has got the same point of view that this was likely a miscarriage of justice and something has to be done. Miscarriages of the justice in the UK are only fixed. The system only has a strong inclination to fix them when there's powerful public opinion saying it should be fixed, this motivates everybody throughout society. And I would say that's a good thing, because otherwise it would not happen, right? So this is where I'm going to stop my recording. So I have to find the right button. Oh, the clock goes off as well, alarm clock.